My son turned toward me in the crowded university arena, cap and gown perfectly pressed tassel, swinging slightly in the breeze of the auditorium doors. Families around us snapped photos, hugged, wiped tears of joy. But not my son. He looked at me like I was something he wanted to hide. "Mom," he said quietly, jaw stiff, "you're not worthy to walk in with me." The words punched through me like ice water. I stood frozen as he offered his arm to his girlfriend's mother. Instead, a woman with diamonds on her throat and judgment in her eyes. I stayed silent until the dean called my name on stage. I should have known something was wrong the minute I walked into the arena that morning. The air felt different, too bright, too loud, too full of families who seemed to belong more than I ever had. Children in honor cords hugged parents holding expensive cameras. Fathers in tailored suits clapped sons on the back. Mothers wore dresses bought specifically for this day. And then there was me. My dress came from the clearance rack at Kohl's 2 years ago, navy blue with tiny threads at the hem I'd stitched back myself. I had pressed it 3 times that morning, smoothing every wrinkle as if each crease erased a little piece of doubt inside me. I arrived early, far too early, probably carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. My son Ethan loved lilies when he was little. He used to pick the wild ones behind our old rental house in Indiana, handing them to me proudly with dirt still clinging to the roots. I bought these flowers because I wanted him to remember that version of us. Before life got complicated, before he entered a world that didn't include me. I stood near the entrance where the graduates would gather before the procession. My heart thudded with nervous pride. Ethan had worked hard. I had worked even harder. Every late-night shift at the diner, every winter morning scraping ice off my old Toyota Corolla at 5:30 a.m. to start another day cleaning classrooms at the high school. Every dollar saved, stretched, sacrificed. Today was supposed to be the reward. But when I saw him walking toward me, tall, handsome, surrounded by his girlfriend Harper and her polished, wealthy family, I felt something tighten in my chest. Harper's mother, Linda, noticed me first. Her hair was the kind of blonde that came from a $200 salon visit, not genetics. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her lips curled politely, but her eyes flicked over me, the way someone inspects a stain on a tablecloth. "Oh," she said, her smile thin, "you must be Ethan's mother." Not Mrs. Taylor, not ma'am, just, "You must be." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Mom," he said in a soft but strained voice, "you made it." Made it. Like I was running late to something I didn't belong in. "I did," I replied, holding out the bouquet. "These are for you." He blinked at them, not with joy, but embarrassment. "Oh, thanks." He didn't take them. Harper stepped slightly in front of him, her manicured fingers grazing his sleeve, as if reminding him to stand straighter. She whispered something into his ear. He nodded almost imperceptibly. That was when he glanced at Linda, her pearl earrings glinting, her posture flawless, and then at me. His jaw tightened. "Mom, about the processional," he began. I forced a smile. "What about it, sweetheart?" He cleared his throat. People around us were lining up. Camera flashes sparkled. A professor called out instructions. Excitement buzzed through the air, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat slowing into something heavy. "Walk in with me," I repeated for him, confused. "You said parents walk with." "Yeah, but," he lowered his voice, eyes darting around. "Mom, it's complicated. You're not dressed for photos, and Harper's family, this is all really important to them. I don't want to make things awkward." Awkward. I felt a sting behind my ribs. "I'll just walk with Linda instead," he said quickly, almost urgently. "It'll look better." My breath hitched. "Look better," I whispered. He didn't answer, or maybe he couldn't. Linda placed her perfectly manicured hand on his arm. "If it makes things smoother, dear," she said sweetly, sweet like lemon squeezed over a wound. Ethan inhaled sharply. Then he said it. The sentence that would replay itself in my mind for weeks, months, maybe years. "Mom, you're not worthy to walk with me today." Something in me cracked. Not loudly. quietly like glass cracking beneath a soft step. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I felt the lilies slipping in my fingers. Suddenly, the petals looked dull cheap out of place in a world full of polished shoes and pressed collars. Harper looked satisfied. Linda looked victorious. Ethan looked relieved. And I felt myself shrinking. Okay, I managed my voice barely audible. If that's what you want. He nodded once, already turning toward Linda, already letting go of the mother who had held him through every fever, every nightmare, every disappointment. As the procession music began, grand, proud, triumphant, I stepped back. I watched them walk together down the wide aisle, Ethan tall and confident, Linda elegant beside him, Harper beaming proudly behind them. Nobody noticed the woman standing alone clutching a bouquet she no longer knew what to do with. I sat in the third row because that's where I always sat for school plays, parent nights, award ceremonies. Close enough to see him, far enough not to bother anyone. My seat felt colder than I remembered. As the line of graduates moved forward, I rested the lilies on my lap. Their stems trembled in my hands, matching the trembling in my chest. I told myself not to cry, not here, not today. The ceremony dragged on each speech, pulling me further inward. My son never looked my way again. But life has a strange way of bending when you least expect it. Because just as the final names were called, just as families stood and clapped, just as my son lifted his head proudly, I heard the dean's voice echo across the arena. Before we conclude, we have one more honoree to recognize today, someone whose impact on this community has been extraordinary. My hands froze, my breath caught. Then he said my name. When the dean called my name, something inside me jolted awake like a match being struck in a pitch-dark room. But the truth is, that moment didn't begin on the stage. It began years before, in a life pieced together with threadbare paychecks, stubborn hope, and the kind of love that doesn't always get noticed. To understand what happened that day, you'd have to understand where Ethan and I came from, or maybe where I came from and where he chose to go instead. I didn't grow up with much. My mother used to say we lived one step above broke, and most days even that felt generous. I married young, too young, and by 25 I was holding Ethan on my hip, while my husband packed a small duffel bag and walked out the front door saying he needed space to find himself. I still remember standing there bouncing Ethan, gently watching taillights fade down our narrow street. I whispered to my baby, "It's just you and me now, sweetheart. We're going to figure this out." And we did, piece by piece, dollar by dollar, shift by shift. I took the first job I could get cleaning classrooms at the local high school. It wasn't glamorous. The fluorescent lights were harsh, the linoleum floors unforgiving, and kids had no shame in leaving behind messes that made me question humanity. But the job was steady, and the insurance meant Ethan could go to the doctor without me choosing between medicine and groceries. For years, my days were a blur of ammonia mops and worn-out sneakers. But every afternoon when I picked Ethan up from after-school care, his little arms around my neck made the exhaustion feel worth it. I'd sit him on the kitchen counter, legs swinging while I cooked cheap dinners, spaghetti, canned soup, grilled cheese. He would babble about new words he learned or drawings he made, and I'd nod, stirring a pot of noodles with one hand while tracing the world's edge with the other. Money was tight, so tight it squeaked. I learned how to stretch $1 like it was elastic. I patched Ethan's jeans, repaired thrift store jackets, and once made his Halloween costume out of a torn bedsheet and fabric paint. People laughed that night, not cruelly, just in surprise, but Ethan didn't care. He hugged me and whispered, "You're the best mom." Those were the good years. Hard, yes. Constantly uncertain, yes, but full of love. Things changed when Ethan hit middle school. Not sharply, just gradually. Suddenly, he wanted brand-name sneakers like the other kids. He didn't want me walking him to the door anymore. He didn't tell me who his friends were or what he liked. I tried to give him space. I tried to let him grow. But a part of me felt him drifting like a boat untethering from its dock. But the real turning point came when he met Harper. It started innocently with him mentioning her name over dinner. He talked about her laugh, her ambition, how smart she was. I was happy for him. Every mother wants her child to find someone who sees their light. But what I didn't know not then was that Harper came from a world built entirely differently from ours. A world where family trees mattered, where you learned which fork to use before you learned multiplication, where wealth wasn't spoken about because it was so obvious it didn't need to be. The first time I met Harper's family, it was at a local diner where I occasionally picked up extra shifts. I offered to meet somewhere more neutral, but Harper insisted. "My mom wants to see where Ethan grew up," she said casually. I didn't think much of it. Maybe I should have. When Linda walked in pearl necklace, crisp white blouse hair, styled like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine, I felt like the oxygen in the diner changed. People noticed her. The way her heels clicked on the floor. The way she scanned the room before sitting. She greeted me warmly enough, but her eyes flicked around the diner, taking stock of the worn booths and laminated menus. "So this is where your mom works, Ethan?" she asked lightly. My son shifted in his seat, cheeks tightening. "She used to," he muttered. "You know, when things were different." Different. The word stung. Dinner felt like an interview I didn't know I'd signed up for. Linda asked polite but pointed questions. "How long have you been in your line of work? Did you ever consider going back to school? You live on the west side of town." "Correct. Near the railroad." She delivered each question like a soft blow wrapped in velvet. Harper complimented my shirt, a floral blouse I'd altered myself, then added, "It's so cute, very vintage." But her smile didn't reach her eyes. Ethan stayed quiet, too quiet. A silence that said he was torn between two worlds, and I didn't belong in the world he wanted. As months passed, Harper's family grew more involved in Ethan's life. Invitations to weekend brunches, networking events, charity galas. Ethan started dressing differently, button-downs, loafers, hairstyle just right. He began talking about internships in corporate environments, about image presentation opportunities. And bit by bit, he began to treat me differently too. Not mean, just embarrassed. He avoided introducing me at events. He spoke over me when I didn't use the right word. He corrected my pronunciation of quinoa at a grocery store once. I laughed it off, but a piece of me crumbled quietly. Still, I held on to hope. I told myself it was just a phase, that the son who picked lilies for me was still in there. But sometimes, love can make us blind. Blind to the warning signs. Blind to the slow unraveling of something we thought was unbreakable. And I didn't realize just how far he'd drifted until months later when I stepped into his apartment unexpectedly and found something that would shatter me in ways I wasn't prepared for. But that's a story for the next part. The day I found the folder, the sky was the dull gray of a winter afternoon, heavy with the kind of stillness that makes you feel like something is waiting for you around the corner. I remember holding a container of food, my chicken noodle casserole, Ethan's favorite, and climbing the steps to his apartment with a strange mix of pride and nerves. He hadn't answered my texts that morning, but I wasn't surprised. He was busy, he always said. Busy with school, busy with Harper, busy with life. I told myself dropping off dinner wasn't an intrusion, just a small kindness from a mother trying to stay connected. The spare key he'd given me 2 years earlier still worked. I let myself in quietly the way mothers do when they've spent years tiptoeing around sleeping children. The apartment smelled faintly of cologne and laundry detergent. It was neat, but not in a warm way, more staged. Neutral-colored furniture, sleek lines, cold lighting. Nothing personal, no photos of us. None of the drawings he made when he was little. None of the silly souvenirs from road trips we used to take when money was too tight for vacations. I walked to the kitchen, placed the casserole in the fridge, washed a mug left in the sink, an instinct as natural as breathing. Then I noticed the mess on his desk. Papers scattered, a laptop open, a thin black folder half tucked under a notebook. I shouldn't have touched it. God knows I told myself that. But something about the corner sticking out, something about the slanted handwriting on a loose sheet, it pulled me like a thread begging to be unraveled. I sat on the edge of his bed folder in my lap, heart tapping lightly against my ribs. I told myself I'd only tidy it up, stack the papers neatly. That was all. But the second I opened it, the air left my lungs. The first page was an email printed highlighted in yellow. From Linda Hawthorne to Harper Hawthorne. Subject: re-image concerns. If Ethan wants a future in serious corporate environments, he'll need to maintain the right image. His background is already humble. The mother situation doesn't help. Encourage him to distance himself politely. It's better for everyone. The mother situation, that was me, a situation. I swallowed hard and kept reading. Another email this time between Harper and Linda. She dropped by again. Brought food. It's sweet, but outdated. Ethan feels obligated to entertain her. It's embarrassing for him. Well, darling, he needs to think about his future. And honestly, once she sells that little house of hers, or, well, once it's no longer her concern, he'll have a financial boost, a starter home, maybe even a car upgrade. I stared at the page, vision swimming. Once it's no longer her concern. Were they waiting for me to die? My hands shook as I continued flipping through documents. Schedules for corporate training programs Linda wanted Ethan to attend, lists of recommended wardrobe changes, notes about eliminating distractions from his past. Then I saw a page with Ethan's handwriting, small, tight, careful. I know Mom means well, but she doesn't fit, not with Harper's family, not with where I'm going. Below it in Harper's rounded script, "We'll help you elevate, babe. You just need to step away from anything that drags you back." Anything that drags you back. I could barely breathe. My throat tightened as I looked around the apartment again, suddenly seeing it differently. The stiff furniture, the pristine surfaces, the absence of anything that had to do with me. He was building a new world, a world where I was clutter. Then came the document that would haunt me the most, a printed message between Harper and Linda, marked with a small sticky note that read, "For Ethan. We can help him move faster socially, but he needs to stop letting her show up unannounced. It's throwing off the image we're building. Maybe suggest she text before visiting, or maybe stop visiting altogether. Suggestion, or maybe stop visiting altogether." I sat frozen on his bed folder, splayed open papers trembling in my lap. The apartment hummed refrigerator heater, the soft buzz of a world that belonged to him now, a world where I wasn't invited. I don't know how long I sat there, maybe minutes, maybe longer. Grief doesn't measure time, it swallows it whole. Eventually, I stacked the papers neatly, put everything back exactly as I found it, like I'd never been there at all. My fingers lingered on the folder for a second longer, as if touching the truth might somehow soften it. Then I stood, walked to the kitchen, and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at my reflection in the stainless steel toaster, eyes red, lips pressed thin. I looked tired, old, out of place. Just as I reached for my coat, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, university office. My heart stuttered. I answered, voice shaky. "Hello." A warm, confident voice responded. "Is this Mrs. Taylor?" "Yes," I whispered. "This is Dean Whitaker from the Community Leadership Program. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." I hesitated, glancing back at the folder lying innocently on the desk. "No," I said softly, "not at all. I'm calling because we've been reviewing names for this year's Community Honor Award," he continued. "It recognizes individuals who've made significant impact through volunteer service." I felt my breath catch. Was he calling me? "We've followed your work with the Women's Career Renewal Program," he said warmly. 12 years of service, over 300 women trained. Your curriculum has been life-changing for so many, and we'd like to honor you at this year's graduation ceremony if you'll accept. The world spun slightly. Honor me. I closed my eyes. Memories flashed, teaching sewing basics in a church basement, helping women write their first resumes, holding hands during setbacks, celebrating their new jobs. I don't know what to say, I managed. "Say you'll be there," he replied. "Your presence will inspire everyone." I felt tears prick behind my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "I'll be there." He thanked me and hung up. I stood in Ethan's cold, quiet kitchen, phone still in hand, feeling two wildly different truths collide inside me. My son was ashamed of me, but the world wasn't. One side wanted to erase me. The other wanted to honor me on a stage. I wiped my face, straightened my coat, and walked out of the apartment carrying a secret that would change everything. Ethan had no idea who his mother really was, but he was about to find out. The days following the dean's call felt unreal, as if someone had quietly lifted me out of my ordinary life and placed me into a story I wasn't sure I deserved. Honored me. A woman who cleaned classrooms, folded laundry for extra income, patched her own shoes when they split at the seams. But the truth is, the honor didn't come out of nowhere. It came from a part of my life Ethan never paid attention to because I never asked him to. He knew I worked. He knew I struggled. He knew we lived paycheck to paycheck. But he didn't know the rest. He didn't know who I became after he went to bed at night. It all started 12 years earlier in the basement of St. Mary's Community Church, a place that smelled of old hymn books, coffee, and furniture polish. A friend had told me the church ran a small program for women trying to get back on their feet, and they were looking for volunteers who could teach practical skills. Well, I'd laughed nervously. The only thing I'm good at is sewing. The coordinator smiled. That's exactly what we need. And so twice a week, after wiping down the last classroom floor and pushing my battered cart into the janitor's closet, I'd drive across town to the church basement. A dozen women would be waiting, sitting in a mismatched circle of folding chairs, each carrying the weight of a life that had pushed them down too many times. We started with simple things, hemming jeans, stitching buttons, reinforcing seams. But something unexpected happened along the way. The more they learned, the more their confidence grew. Soon we had women making tote bags, aprons, pillows, then selling them at local fairs, then small boutiques. A few months later, a community college instructor heard about the group and invited me to partner with their Women's Career Renewal Program. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have formal credentials. But they said what I had was more valuable experience, compassion, and results. That's how I found myself teaching classes in a cramped classroom with flickering lights and outdated sewing machines that jammed every other hour. But the energy in that room, it was electric. Women who had never believed in themselves were suddenly discovering what they were capable of. I saw shy mothers lift their chins higher. I saw survivors of terrible relationships find a way to stand again. I saw women cry when they sold their first handmade item. I saw hope, real raw hope, return to faces that had forgotten what it felt like. I wasn't just teaching sewing. I was teaching independence, dignity, possibility. And word spread. Within a year, my class had a waiting list. Within 2 years, we upgraded to a larger space. Within 5, our graduates had earned enough collectively to get recognized by the state. When the dean said I'd helped over 300 women, he wasn't exaggerating. He was honoring something I had poured my soul into, something I never bragged about, something I didn't expect applause for. So why didn't Ethan know? Maybe because every time he came home from campus on weekends, I didn't want to burden him with the struggles of women he'd never met. Maybe because I didn't want him to feel responsible for the way our lives had been shaped by hardship. Maybe because I was afraid he'd shrug and say, "Oh, that's cool, Mom," and go back to whatever was on his phone. Or maybe I didn't think anyone cared enough to hear my story. But the dean cared, those women cared, the community cared. And soon, the entire graduation ceremony would care. I spent the days leading up to the event preparing quietly, carefully. I didn't tell Ethan. I didn't tell Harper or Linda. I didn't tell anyone except the women in my class who surprised me with a bouquet of hand-sewn fabric lilies wrapped in satin ribbon. For luck, they said, hugging me tightly. The night before the ceremony, I stood in front of my closet staring at the clothes I owned. Nothing felt right, not because they weren't good enough, but because none of them carried the meaning I needed. Then I saw it folded neatly on the top shelf, the blouse I had sewn the night before my first ever class in the church basement. Cream-colored, simple, fitted at the sleeves with careful stitching that had taken me hours. I held it to my chest. This was the one. I paired it with navy dress pants I'd saved 3 months to buy for special occasions. Then nervously I curled my hair the way the women in my class often encouraged me to. "You look like a leader," they'd say. For the first time in my life, I wanted to believe them. The next morning I woke before the alarm. My stomach swirled with nerves, but underneath them was a steadiness I couldn't explain, a quiet strength humming inside me. I arrived at the university 45 minutes early carrying the fabric lilies my students had made. The early sunlight poured across the brick walkways, catching on the steel frames of the scholarship plaques near the main building. People passed me without a second glance. Parents walking arm in arm, graduates laughing, professors adjusting their robes. None of them knew that a woman in the crowd wearing a handmade blouse and holding fabric flowers was about to be honored in front of every single person in that arena. None of them knew the humiliation I'd endured just minutes earlier when Ethan told me I wasn't worthy to walk with him. None of them knew that beneath my calm smile was a heart stitched together by faith pain and years of pushing forward even when life tried to unravel me. I sat quietly as the ceremony began, tucked into my usual third-row spot. The seat felt like home and exile all at once. Ethan didn't look at me. He stood tall, perfect posture, every inch of him shaped to fit into Harper's world. When his name was called, the crowd cheered. I clapped softly privately. 40 minutes passed, maybe an hour. I don't know. My pulse slowed to a dull throb in my ears until I heard the dean step up to the microphone again. Before we conclude, he said, "We have one final honor to present." I sat very still. This individual has given more to this community than words can measure. Ethan's group fell silent. She has trained over 300 women, helping them rebuild their lives with courage and skill. My heartbeat quickened. She has lifted others in ways few ever see, and today we see her. And then my name filled the arena. For a moment, no one moved. Then a hush fell across the crowd. Heads turned, eyes searched. And Ethan looked like the earth itself had cracked beneath him. But that was just the beginning. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My name echoed through the arena like something pulled out of a dream I'd forgotten I once had. "Martha Hale," the dean repeated, voice steady, proud. "Please come to the stage." I must have looked stunned because the woman beside me nudged my arm gently. "That's you, sweetheart," she whispered, smiling like she knew something holy was happening. My knees trembled when I stood. I held the fabric lilies to my chest, fingers clutching them like a lifeline. The aisle in front of me seemed impossibly long, a runway lit by overhead spotlights and hundreds of curious eyes. Each step felt slow, surreal. I heard whispers. Who is she? What did she do? Isn't she a custodian here? But then the clapping started soft at first, like distant raindrops. A few parents, a row of students, a professor, and then more. Dozens more. Until it swelled into something powerful, undeniable. Applause that lifted me, carried me forward. Halfway down the aisle, I glanced to the left where Ethan stood frozen in the second row with the other graduates. His face was pale, his lips slightly parted, his eyes wide with disbelief. Harper beside him stiffened like someone had jabbed her in the ribs with an unseen elbow. I didn't look away, not this time. He needed to see me, all of me. The dean stepped toward me as I reached the stairs. He extended his hand, warm and steady. "Mrs. Hale," he said softly, "we are honored to have you here today." Me honored, I swallowed hard, unable to speak. He guided me to center stage. The bright auditorium lights washed over me, hotter and harsher than I expected, but somehow they didn't scare me. Not today. The massive screen behind us flickered, and suddenly photos filled the display. My photos. Pictures of the community classes. Women gathered around sewing machines, laughter spilling from the frames, graduates holding up their first handmade bags with pride, my hands guiding theirs, faces of joy, struggle, hope. My breath caught. These images, the dean said into the microphone, represent 12 years of tireless work by a woman who has changed the lives of more than 300 women in our city. The audience murmured, moved. She did this quietly without recognition while working full-time nights to support her son, who happens to be graduating today. I closed my eyes. The truth of it, spoken out loud, witnessed, felt like a weight lifting from my chest. Then the dean continued, voice ringing with conviction. She taught more than sewing. She taught dignity. She taught perseverance. She taught these women that rebuilding their lives is not a miracle, it's a skill. One she gave freely, compassionately, consistently. My throat tightened. In the corner of my eye, I saw a few people stand, then more, and suddenly the entire front section rose to their feet. A standing ovation. For me. Applause roared through the hall, not polite or obligatory, but full-bodied, wholehearted, the kind that shakes the walls and sinks into your bones. I pressed a hand to my heart, overwhelmed. I'd like to invite one of the program's graduates to share a few words, the dean said. A woman stepped forward from backstage, tall, confident, wearing a navy blazer and a warm smile I recognized instantly. Angela. One of my first students. A survivor of a marriage that nearly broke her spirit. A woman who stitched herself back together one hemline at a time. She hugged me tightly before turning to the microphone. When I met Martha, she said, voice strong but trembling with emotion, I was a mother with no job, no confidence, and no idea how to take care of my children alone. She paused, wiping away a tear. She didn't just teach me to sew, she taught me to believe in myself again. Now I run a small business, I have a team of 5, and my daughters see a woman who stands tall, all because someone saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. The crowd erupted into applause again. Angela turned to me, her smile soft and full of gratitude. You saved my life, she whispered, voice trembling. My own tears finally slipped free. I glanced toward Ethan again. He wasn't standing. He wasn't clapping. He was crying. Shoulders shaking, face buried in his hands. The image hit me harder than anything the dean had said. He wasn't humiliated, he was shattered. Harper, however, sat stiff and unmoved, lips pursed tightly, arms crossed, like someone watching a stranger's misfortune instead of her own partner's reckoning. And suddenly it all clicked. The embarrassment Ethan felt earlier, the shame he'd projected onto me, it wasn't born from cruelty, it was born from ignorance. He didn't know who I really was. He had never known, because I never told him. The applause died down as the dean stepped forward again, holding a plaque, a beautiful wooden piece with gold engraving, my name etched into it forever. For extraordinary service, he read aloud, and for changing the lives of women in our community, we present this award to Martha Hale. My hands shook as he placed it in them. The weight was solid, grounding, real. I turned to face the audience. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a ghost. I didn't feel like someone people overlooked. I didn't feel small. I felt seen. Truly deeply seen. I leaned into the microphone. My voice came out soft but steady. I have spent my whole life working quietly in the background because that's what mothers do. We work in the shadows, hoping the people we love will shine. I never expected to be up here today. I didn't think anyone noticed, but you did, and thank you. A ripple of warmth moved through the crowd, and to the women I've taught, I continued palm, resting over my heart. You're the reason I kept going. Your strength taught me everything I know about hope. This honor belongs to all of you. The applause returned gentler now, like a warm embrace. When I stepped off the stage, Angela hugged me again. Professors shook my hand. Parents of students thanked me for what I'd done for their community. But my eyes kept drifting to one place, to the young man who still hadn't lifted his head. My son. The boy I raised. The man who didn't know his own mother. Not yet, but he would, starting today. I didn't go to Ethan right away. Not because I wanted him to suffer, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed a moment, just a single breath to steady myself before facing the boy who once held my hand crossing the street, yet couldn't bear to walk beside me on his graduation day. I stepped into the hallway outside the auditorium, leaning against the cool wall. My plaque pressed softly against my ribs, the wood warm from my hands. The fabric lilies rested in the crook of my arm, their softness grounding me. I closed my eyes. My heart wasn't angry anymore. It was simply tired of carrying the weight of love alone. I sensed him before I heard him. The shuffling footsteps, the uneven breathing, the hesitation of someone who wanted to go back but knew he couldn't. Mom. His voice cracked, not from embarrassment this time, but from something deeper, something raw. I turned. Ethan stood a few feet away, robe half undone, mortarboard in his hand. His hair mussed like he'd run his hands through it 100 times. His eyes were red, swollen, shining with the kind of pain only truth can bring. For a second, neither of us moved. Then slowly, almost cautiously, he took a step forward. Mom! His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Please, don't walk away. I wasn't walking away. I wasn't moving at all. I was waiting for him to do what he should have done years ago. He closed the distance and stopped right in front of me. I didn't know he whispered. I didn't know any of it. I didn't know what you did, who you were to these women, how much you... He broke off, chest heaving. I studied his face carefully, searching for honesty. Not excuses, not guilt, not obligation. Honesty. What exactly didn't you know, Ethan? My voice came out calm, almost too calm, because today you made it pretty clear what you did think you knew. He cringed, actually cringed, as if the memory of his own words physically hurt him. I thought... He squeezed his eyes shut. I thought you were just... my mom. The woman who cleaned classrooms, the woman who fixed things and made everything stretch. The woman who always said she was tired but still kept going. His voice trembled. I never realized you were someone other people admired, someone who changed lives, someone extraordinary. I inhaled sharply. It was the first time in years, maybe in his entire life, that he had said anything like that. But the wound was still fresh, and wounds don't heal because someone says sorry. Ethan, I said softly, I never needed you to brag about me. I never needed you to think I was special. But today, when you told me I made you ashamed... He shook his head violently. Mom, I swear I didn't mean it the way it sounded. But you did mean it, I corrected. That's why it came so easily. He opened his mouth and closed it again. Then his shoulders slumped in defeat. You're right, he whispered. Silence settled between us, heavy, unavoidable. Then he looked up, pleading. I got so wrapped up in Harper's world, the way she talks, the way she sees things, the way she measures people. I thought that was what success looked like. And what did you think I was? I asked quietly. His voice cracked into a whisper. Someone who didn't fit. The words stung sharp, blunt, honest. And yet, I needed to hear them. Because truth is the only thing from which real change can grow. He ran a trembling hand across his face. But when they said your name, and when those women talked about you, and when I saw the pictures, the applause, the award, Mom, I realized I don't even know who you are. My chest tightened. He wasn't being cruel. He wasn't dismissing me. He was waking up. I know who you are to me, he said, urgently stepping forward. You're the woman who raised me alone, the woman who worked nights so I didn't have to give up my dreams, the woman who taught me right from wrong. But I didn't know the rest of you. His eyes overflowed, tears slipping down his cheeks. And today, I felt ashamed. But not of you, God, not of you. I was ashamed of myself. My breath shuddered. That was the truth. Finally, he took another hesitant step. Mom, please say something. I looked at him for a long, silent moment. He was still my boy. Still the baby who used to hold my pinky finger with his whole fist. Still the child who cried on the first day of kindergarten because he didn't want to leave me. Somewhere along the way, he had lost himself in someone else's expectations. But he had found his way back, here, now. Crying in the hallway because he finally understood the cost of forgetting where he came from. I reached out slowly and cupped his cheek. He leaned into my hand like he used to when he had fevers. "When you walked away from me today," I said gently, "you broke something." His lips trembled. "But when you looked at me from your seat," I continued, "I saw something break inside you too." He let out a shaky breath, nodding. "And now I finished, we start rebuilding, but not the way it was before. This time, you build too." A choked sound escaped him, half sob, half relief. He pulled me into a tight hug, his arms wrapping around me with a desperation I hadn't felt from him since he was little. "I'm sorry," he whispered into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry." I held him, not because the apology fixed everything, but because he meant it. Really meant it. After a long moment, he pulled back, wiping at his face. And just when I thought the air might soften between us, Harper appeared at the end of the hallway. Perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect scowl. "Oh," she said flatly, "there you are." Ethan stiffened. I didn't say a word. She crossed her arms, unimpressed. "We're supposed to take pictures. Everyone's waiting." Her tone was sharp, impatient, like she was calling a dog. Ethan looked at her, then at me, then back at her. And something inside him shifted. "No," he said quietly, "not right now." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me." I said no, he repeated, stronger this time. "I'm talking to my mom." Harper blinked, stunned, as if Ethan had just defied the laws of physics. But he wasn't done yet. "And we're not doing things your way anymore." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply stood there watching my son finally reclaim himself piece by piece. Harper's jaw tightened. "You're being ridiculous." "No," Ethan said firmly. "For the first time in a long time, I'm not." Harper stared at him, waiting for him to cave. He didn't. Then she flicked her eyes toward me, lips curling into a faint cold smirk only I caught. "Fine," she snapped. "Have your moment." She spun on her heel and sashayed down the hallway, heels clicking like tiny hammers hitting stone. Ethan watched her go. Then he whispered, "I don't think that relationship is going to last." I raised an eyebrow. He gave a humorless laugh. "Yeah, I know." We stood there together, quiet, both of us breathing a little easier. Because something had changed. Something big. Something irreversible. The world finally saw me. And now, my son was starting to see me too. Ethan and I walked out of that hallway slowly, almost cautiously, two people relearning how to walk beside each other after years of drifting apart. The sunlight outside the auditorium had softened into late afternoon gold, brushing everything with a warm glow that made the campus look like a postcard. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The steps under our feet felt heavy with everything unspoken, yet lighter, so much lighter than they had been just hours earlier. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Mom, can we sit for a minute?" I nodded. We found an empty bench under a maple tree near the quad. Students in graduation robes laughed with their families at a distance, snapping photos, piling into cars, living out the version of the day Ethan had imagined earlier. A version that hadn't included me. He looked down at his hands. "I'm not proud of the way I acted." "I know," I said gently. His voice faltered, trying so hard to be someone I'm not. I waited. He exhaled slowly. "Harper's mom, she expects everything to look perfect. She always says things like, 'Your image is your future.' And I guess I started to believe it." I glanced at him, "And you thought I didn't fit that image." He winced, eyes closing. "Yeah, I did. And that was wrong. So wrong." A breeze rustled the leaves above us. For a moment, the world felt strangely peaceful. "Mom," Ethan continued, his voice low, "when the dean said your name, when everyone stood up, when I saw the photos of all those women whose lives you changed." He shook his head slowly, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his robe. "I realized I've been chasing someone else's definition of success, and I was blind to the fact that the strongest person I know was standing right in front of me the whole time." I pressed my lips together, emotion tightening my chest. "I never expected you to be perfect, Ethan. I just wanted you to remember where you came from." "I forgot," he whispered, "and I'm sorry." "Do you want to remember now?" I asked softly. He finally looked at me, really looked at me. Brown eyes deep and earnest like when he was little. "Yes," he said, "more than anything." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. He reached into the pocket of his robe and pulled out something folded, worn at the edges from handling. He held it out to me sheepishly. "What's this?" I asked. "I wrote it during the ceremony," he said, "while you were on stage." I unfolded the paper. It was a handwritten note, crooked lines, misspelled words he'd crossed out, blots of ink where a tear must have fallen. The words were simple, but they were enough to break me open. "Mom, I'm proud of you. I want to be someone you can be proud of too. Teach me how to be better. I'm ready to learn." My fingers trembled as I held it. He watched my face nervously. Do you forgive me?" Forgiveness. Such a small word, such a large weight. "I forgive you," I whispered, "but forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to move forward together." Ethan breathed out a shaky sigh of relief, and then hesitantly leaned his head on my shoulder like he used to when he was 10 and exhausted from soccer practice. For a long time, we just sat like that, mother and son, letting the afternoon light stitch the torn pieces between us. Eventually, he straightened. "Mom, can we start over? Not just today. I mean, everything. Our relationship." "Yes," I said softly. "We start now." He nodded, eyes bright with determination. "I'm dropping the internship with Harper's family. I want to build my career my way, honestly." He paused. "And I want you to teach me about the program, about the women you helped, about what you did all those years. I want to know you." My heart swelled. "All right," I said, "but I'm going to put you to work. It isn't glamorous." "I know," he said, smiling weakly. "That's the point." A small laugh escaped me. Good, because glamour's never changed a life. Work does. He nodded, absorbing the lesson like sunlight. Then he asked, "So, what happens with Harper now?" I sighed. "That's for you to decide." He stared at the ground. "I already know. She doesn't see me, not the real me. She only sees who she wants me to become." "And who do you want to be?" I asked. "A man who doesn't forget the people who raised him," he said simply. I cupped his cheek again. "Then you're already changing." A silence settled between us, softer this time, warmer. "Mom," he whispered, "thank you for not giving up on me." "I couldn't," I replied. "Mothers don't quit. We get tired, we hurt, but we don't quit." He leaned into me, and I felt maybe for the first time in years my son truly come home. As the sun dipped lower and families drifted away, Ethan stood and offered me his hand. "Walk with me," he asked. The words hit me with unexpected force. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but out of choice. I slipped my hand into his. "Yes," I said quietly, "I'd like that." We walked across the quad together, slowly matching each other's pace. For the first time all day, he didn't rush ahead. He stayed beside me, step for step, heart for heart. When we reached the main walkway, he stopped. "Mom, let's take a picture." My breath caught. He held up his phone, smiling through tears. "With you, with your award, with the woman I'm proud of." I blinked hard as he positioned us in front of the setting sun. He wrapped his arm around my shoulder and pulled me close. The camera clicked. But the moment lived deeper than the photo. It lived in the way he held me, in the way he looked at me, in the way he finally saw me. We stayed there until the last families drifted away, until the sky blushed into twilight, until the weight of the day settled into something like peace. Before we left, Ethan squeezed my hand. "I'm going to earn the right to walk with you," he said, "not just today, for the rest of my life." I smiled. "You already took the first step." And as we headed toward the parking lot, I thought of all the women I'd taught over the years, all the stitches, all the tears, all the tiny miracles sewn into fabric and futures. Change happens slowly, thread by thread, heart by heart. And sometimes, miraculously, it happens in the hallway of a graduation ceremony where a mother finally becomes visible to the son she never stopped loving. Before I end this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a moment that changed everything between you and someone you love? Tell me where you're watching from and share your story if you feel safe to. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a moment that might touch your heart or remind you that you're not alone. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by who sees you, but by the person you choose to become.